Now, this is a video that I did not think I would ever be making in my lifetime. Over the past few starts, Jacob deGrom has definitely struggled. He definitely has not looked like Jacob deGrom. He had a tough outing at Oakland, which was definitely one of the biggest shockers. Even though he looked a little bit better in Atlanta, still gave up 3 solo shots in a must-win game for this team to take the National League East Division. If all goes as scheduled to plan, the next appearance that Jacob deGrom will make will most likely be in the playoffs. And this is where this situation comes into question of how much concern is there for Jacob deGrom.
On 3-2, Bader. Swings and misses, strike 3. He struck him out. 5 Met pitchers combined for the second no-hitter in New York Mets history.
Now, we all know the story on Jacob deGrom of how he became one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. Last year, had multiple injuries, was out for half of the season, looked to be coming back in spring training, then suffered another major injury and came back in August. One of the main sour tastes in everybody's mouth right now is obviously the big talk of him opting out of his contract. And even though he didn't say it directly himself, the camp around him is sort of reporting that he might want $45 to $50 million in free agency. This is a tough spot. We all know that at his best, he's the best in all of baseball, but he struggled recently, and he has definitely not looked like himself. Overall, keeping the contract aside, keeping all the free agency stuff aside, how much concern is there for Jacob deGrom?
This is the biggest time of the year, and this is where you need the ace, the best pitcher on the planet, everything that everyone has called him. And he has looked like Taijuan Walker the last 2 times out on the mound. He just doesn't look right. And you know what? We kind of threw it away, against Oakland. Angel Hernandez behind the plate. He's squeezing him, yada, yada, throw it away. And then when we need him to show up big time, especially against the Atlanta Braves, the division on the line, and it's just getting absolutely bombed by leaving fastballs over the middle. The slider control has not been the same the last 2 starts. We don't need you to implode now. We need you now. And if you're just going to implode, maybe the discussion has to be that he is maybe not the best pitcher anymore. If he's falling apart, if he can't control a slider, is he really that good? If he's got no control of it, which he hasn't had the last 2 times, you're starting to see this guy look like a solid pitcher. He still had quality starts, but now maybe we take him out of the conversation of, hey, he's dominant, but he has to have a slider. If he doesn't have a slider, still a good pitcher, but maybe not the great we thought he would be, because he has not had fastball control. He's not been batting that outside corner fastball, which it seems he always did to play off the slider. And now he's leaving the slider over the middle of the plate. It's just getting wild. So it is something to be concerned about, especially now when we need him the most down the stretch going into October. It's not looking good.
And that's the whole essential concern, I'd say, with this whole situation is when you talk about how he doesn't have his slider, maybe he isn't one of the best pitchers in all of baseball. But the thing is that when has he never had his slider? That's the thing. These last 2 starts have been the only time where we're like, okay, what's going on here? And it doesn't look like he's able to slice the zone with this slider anymore. I think these adjustments have been made. He just has not been able to execute them fully to full on master them. Do I think that he's going to solve these problems, especially essentially with that slider? Absolutely. But the clock is definitely ticking for him to solve that problem. Now, as for that outing against the Atlanta Braves, I was a little disappointed with the lack of changeups and curveballs for a team that seems to chase out of the zone a lot. Even though they were taking a lot of pitches out of the zone, it really would have been nice to insert a little bit better of a game plan besides being very fastball and slider heavy. We all know they're looking for that slider of dot in the quarters. We all know they're looking for that high shelf fastball. I do think that the game plan was not the best executed, but all I can really say is that he still did strike out 11 batters. He just missed really bad 3 times, and it cost them the game. At the end of the day, yes, they didn't hit. That's a completely different story, and we can also talk about that with Scherzer the next game. But overall, Jake really did not do himself any favors. Guaranteeing that he's going to dominate for 7 innings, giving up no runs, maybe 1 or 2 hits, I don't know. I'm not sure. Do I think he can do that at any given night? Absolutely. But this is definitely not the time to fall. And then that leads me to this question. As said, the next appearance that Jake makes will most likely be in the postseason. We all know that he's our starting pitcher 1 off the top of our head, Max Scherzer. Even though he did have a tough outing, how do you feel about the possibility of him being the game one starter? Is that in the cards for the Mets?
Max didn't look good either. Both of them were just hell bent on throwing fastballs and sliders to a team that just kills fastballs. And it's a topic, obviously both guys to bed when we needed them to be themselves, and they weren't. They were middle of the line type pitchers getting quality starts instead of dominant. See, Max has got way more postseason experience, so you have that in a corner. One guy's won a ring. I'm expecting it to be in the wild card series, especially how this team played, but there's still a chance. It's game one of the NLDS. I'm not holding my damn breath about it. Game one of a series, most likely against the Padres. Jake, both guys have dominated the Padres in the past, so you're taking your pick there. Maybe you do go to Max just because of the postseason experience of the guy that's been there, done that so many times. You just let him take game one, and then Jake, especially with him not being himself, Max before last night was looking like Max Scherzer, every other start of his career, or at least in the Mets tenure. I feel a little more confident with Max on the mound right now than I do with Jake, because if Jake doesn't have that slider, it is something to think about. If he doesn't have it, it's starting to be a concern.
Now let's put the concerns aside for a second. Let me ask you this. The 45 million, the so-called 50 million that he is apparently chasing after, we haven't heard him publicly say it. If Jacob deGrom were to be Jacob deGrom, dominating in the playoffs, being the best pitcher in baseball, how are you approaching him in free agency? Let's say he finally figures it out. He makes the adjustments like he's been able to do throughout his entire career. How are you handling him in free agency? Are you willing to give him that 40 to 45 or $50 million AAV?
Minus 2015, we haven't seen Jacob deGrom do it in the playoffs. So if he goes out there and is shoving and is, gets his slider actually to work properly, and he goes out and dominates, we could talk about that dollar value. If you come up and throw another goose egg, I'm already starting to, let him walk if he doesn't perform. Obviously last night or 2 nights ago wasn't a great start. If he lays another egg in the postseason, especially how this offense is doing, I would take that money and go spend it on the offense, because the Braves are showing you can have average pitching and you need an elite offense in today's game. So Jake goes out and is Jake, then we can give him the money. But if he goes out and lays another egg in the postseason after the start in Atlanta, after 3 straight horrific starts, yeah, he has the repertoire. He's got the whole resume. He's getting older. Obviously, he's going to be 35 next year.
It really is crazy to think about that he's possibly playing for that mega contract, because, we thought that, once he comes back, first few starts, he was as dominant as ever. And now these last 2 starts, it's just been a very tough taste in your mouth. And he's definitely put more of a spotlight than he likes to have on himself. We already know he's an even tone guy. He's not one who is really that or all out there or whatever. So he's definitely put a tighter spotlight on himself right now. And maybe that's something that he really needs. I know that Jacob deGrom is better than this. I know that he can be better than this. Do I think he will be? That's for him to decide at this point. But do I still believe in Jacob deGrom, given his track record of how good he is and how dominant he has been in baseball for the last 4 or 5 years? Absolutely. I'm still confident in Jacob deGrom. But if he does lay an egg in the postseason, there's definitely going to be a lot of backlash. And for someone who has enjoyed watching Jacob deGrom, he is the greatest pitcher I have ever witnessed in my lifetime. It sucks to possibly see it end like that. But all I can say right now is we do need this guy to perform. We need him to be Jacob deGrom again. Now, there were some reports after the game that he came out after 86 pitches because of a blister. This entire topic, it really goes to the Taijuan Walker situation. If you're not 100%, don't pitch. Don't push it. Don't make it worse. As for that, I am very disappointed in Jake for that situation. If you're not 100%, don't go. We can have Max go. We can have Bassett go. We'll have somebody go in your place, and you'll go a few days later. And as for someone who has had a lot of injuries recently in these past 12 months, I do think that he was a little irresponsible in that whole situation. I understand it was just a blister, but the point stands. I'm not saying that he's making an excuse for why he pitched not like himself, but I do think that he handled it poorly than I expected him to actually handle it.
But, obviously we don't have time for excuses. And obviously he said, the blister, whatever. And, you got nobody else. Jake had to throw in the series. Again, he pitched like a normal pitcher. Got a quality start out of it. He pitched normally, but, I'm not going to take it as an excuse. It should have been. Should he have been on the mound? He has to be on the mound in this series. I don't care if he had 3 fingers. He had to pitch in this series. I don't care, barring it was actually a serious injury.
Oh, yeah.
So.
I'm not denying that. But what I'm saying is that if he has a blister that was bothering him in Oakland, move him to game 2 or move him to game 3. I'm putting him on the mound in that series. But what I'm saying is that If he's not 100% and he's only at 93%, get him to 100% first. They just have to be a little bit smart about this, even though it's go time, even though this team put themselves in a position where they have to win these games because they couldn't put away terrible teams. All I can say is that I was very disappointed in the fact that Jake kind of handled that whole situation, especially in his last 12 months where he's had a lot of major injuries, even though it's just a blister again. But as for him gripping the ball, controlling that slider, it's a little bit more major than you think it is. I'm not trying to baby him or anything. I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that he needs to be a little bit more of a responsible type of pitcher. And I thought he was a little bit more smarter than that. And that's what I am disappointed in. But I know that he can be better. And that's what I'm hoping that he can be. I believe in Jacob deGrom. I want to keep him long term. I want him to be a Met for his entire career. It sucks that the trajectory of where it's going right now, if these are his last games as a Met, I enjoyed watching him as a Met. He is the greatest pitcher I've ever seen in my lifetime, but we still got a job to do. One job is to win the World Series, and that's what we're going to be trying to do by making a deep postseason run. And hopefully Jake is one of the main catalysts like he has been since he was a rookie. So it is as it stands. The stage is set and we're moving on to the postseason. Jake, we still believe in you and we know you can be better.